Hello, and welcome to another lecture in our Hindu traditions class. Today, we are going to be talking about Darshan, so sort of the way of interacting when seeing a god, and the sense of wonder. We're going to be looking at the book here, The Cow and the Elevator, an Anthropology of Wonder that came out recently by Tulasi Srinivas. Now, what I want to get at here when I'm asking about what is wonder is how do we experience wonder? That sense of excitement and open-heartedness when we see an image or when we're in a religious context. How can religions inspire wonder, and how can technology be a driver for inspiring wonder and for religious intervention or innovations? So as we're looking here, we have to be thinking about darshan. Remember, darshan means to see. Darshan is very visual. So Srinivas, when she's writing, is mostly writing about interactions with deities that are mediated by the visual senses. Interactions and transactions with deities, even when you're making an offering to a deity, are mostly visual. So how does the visual and how does vision operate in Hinduism? Well, when you're looking at an image, which is the other words are like pratima, which means like image, and murti means like a body or a manifestation or a solid form of the deity. You look at the deity and you interact with the deity, but you also read the deity. In fact, every temple and every image of a deity tells a story. And once you know those stories, when you look at the deity, you read the deity. So if I were to read Ganesh here, I would see in his front arms, the first is the Abhaya Mudra in his right hand, which means have no fear. There's a swastika there. Remember, swastikas come from India. It means infinity or self-manifest. Has nothing to do with Nazism. And then in his other hand, he has a bowl of ladus, bowl of big sweets. These are these sweet things. So he's telling you, have no fear, and here, have some tasty snacks. Then you see his big belly. Why? Because he's a corpulent, chubby god, because he likes to eat ladus too. This shows you that he's beneficent, that he's jolly, that he's happy, that he wants to help you out. But you also have to remember, Ganesha is the Lord of beginnings and the Lord of endings, the one who bestows and the one who removes obstacles. It's as if when you see Ganesha, you're knocking on the door, he's like, oh, you can't come in. And then he's like, okay, you can come in. He's both the keep you out and bring you in. To symbolize this, we see in his one hand, you'll see that he's carrying a noose. And the other hand, and that thing that looks a bit like an axe, is actually an elephant goad. The idea is when a mahout is on top of an elephant, they jab the elephant like, go left. They jab the elephant with this elephant goad to get it to go in a certain direction or in another direction. In the same way, Ganesha will, if you don't follow what he says and his indications, he will jab you with a goad, and that sucks. But if you follow what he says, he'll slip the noose around your neck and not choke you, but lightly guide you in whatever you want. Now, you'll see below that he has a mouse. Now, that mouse is his vehicle. It's interesting here. This mouse is actually a bandicoot, and the Hindi term is like pig rat. So we think that it's kind of amusing that an elephant would ride a mouse, and it is. And it's cartoonishly funny when it's depicted. But it's not just that juxtaposition that's important. The mouse as a bandicoot is a very large rat, and it is known to be able to get into anywhere. So no obstacle will stop it. Once again, you see the symbolism of Ganesha is sort of worked out in everything you see. Now, you'll see that he only has one tusk. One of his tusks is broken off, and that gives him his name Ekadantya, one-tusked one. Some folks, well, there's all sorts of stories for how he has his one tusk. One of my favorites that is not in the critical edition of the Mahabharata is that Ganesh wrote the Mahabharata, and he didn't have a pen, so he cracked off one of his tusks, and he used that to write it down. So all of these images you can read in this way. So we read an image when we look at it. So transacting with deities, as I've argued throughout the class, is the primary practice in Hinduism. Deities are present in these images or embodied murtis or bodies. Murtis can be found all over the place. You can see them in large temples, you can see them in small temples, you can see them as the main image in a temple or as smaller images all around. One thing you'll find is in a lot of temples, you'll find a small Ganesha right at the beginning of the temple, in the temple doorway, because he's the Lord of doorways and he's the Lord of beginnings and endings. So he's the first one and the last one you should see when you're doing temple worship. All right, so You'll also see what's called a spandrel. Now, a spandrel, and this is an idea out of architecture, is it's just a little image that's put in to fill space. So when you go to Hindu temples, sometimes you'll just see an overwhelming amount of gods, some who are actively being worshipped, and sometimes you'll just have little kind of general gods. They're just plopped in there, just to let you know that gods are everywhere. You'll also see these images in posters and paintings. So I have, if you look up on the slide here, you'll see that you have the type of worship that could be done in a home on the left, like a small worship shrine. Then you see a painting. So people will have paintings and posters that they'll either purchase from temples or sometimes just purchase sort of on the streets. Then to the right further, you see a very elaborate Ganesh that's found in a temple. And the thing that really amuses me is you can see a lot of like little Ganesha images that will be put on the sort of dashboard of a car, sort of like having a plastic Jesus there. All of these murtis are considered to be living gods, worthy of reverence, sites of transactions. Interactions with these smaller images, especially when they're in the home, can be quite intimate. Now, I've talked about how an image comes to life when they paint the eyes on. Now, they really do this in the main temples with big images. If you have a little Ganesh that you're going to, put in your car, that's not going to have a ritual probably to install the deity in there and bring it to life. But it's still worthy of reverence and good luck, and it's good to focus your devotion on them. So we're talking about darshan again. The main activity that you engage in when you go to a temple, and we're talking about temple Hinduism now, is you see God. Upon entering, you wait in line to see God. When you get to the front, and this could take a while. I've waited hours to see a god. And then sometimes I walk right into temples. It depends on how popular the temple is, what if it's a special ritual day or not. You can never really tell. When you reach the front, it's just you and God. There might be a priest there helping you do your thing, but there's an idea that it's just you looking at God and God looking at you. And for a split second, you have a moment with God. And it's exciting. So in some temples, you'll actually be waiting in the dark, and it'll be completely dark, and then they'll flash a light for a split second. And in that split second, it lights up the god, and you just get that brief, momentous, just sort of jarring, exciting moment where you see God. The worshiper gazes at God, and God gazes at the worshiper. They share a moment. When you go to the temple to do a worship or for a ritual, you're going to see God. Sometimes you're just going to see God. I know amongst a lot of my Hindu friends, we won't say, oh, let's go to the temple. We'll just say, let's go see God. So the key to this is sharing that moment and in sharing that experience with God. Remember, the word bhakti or devotion actually means sharing. The worshiper may pray or just dwell in happiness at being with God. In Hinduism, prayer and worship are not separate things as they are in Christianity. Think about how when you pray to God versus you sing a worship for God, those are different things in Christianity. But with Hinduism, they're really not. They're kind of considered to all be the same realm. So the worshiper may make an offering to the deity there, and that's usually mediated by a priest. And then after you've made that offering, they hand you a prasad. Prasad means something like edible grace. So they'll give you like a little sweet, some bits of coconut, maybe a banana or something like that. And it's thought to be the very edible grace of God that you can consume. Now you can eat that right away. I usually try to eat mine right away. If they give me sacred water and I'm in India, I don't drink it because I get sick over there all the time, but you can kind of wash it over your head like that. And that's perfectly acceptable. Even though a priest will generally say, oh no, you can drink that because it's from God. So there's no way it'll make you sick. It'll make you sick. Anyway, so you can eat that right away, or some people actually take some with them, or will get like a double dose of prasad. And what you do is you take it home to give to someone in your household so that they can also share in God's grace. And it's thought to be very good luck. They'll really do this for people who are sick. It's thought to be healing. In larger temples with Brahmin priests, those Brahmin priests will do everything for the worshiper. So they're there dealing with a god. They'll take your gifts. They'll take donations. They'll take your transactions. They'll do sort of offering things. They'll hand you a big tray of burning camphor, wave it over your head. They'll do all of that. But if you're in a smaller temple that doesn't have Brahmin priests, There might just be a temple attendant who's not a Brahmin or who isn't a priest. There's just somebody hanging out that'll help you. In really small temples with no priests, like neighborhood temples, or if you go to a temple that doesn't have active worship being done, the worshiper then will do all of the rituals herself. And it'll be very similar to how you would do a puja for worship in your own home. Now, in Hinduism, sight is touch. Or think back to Sankhya. So a ray of vision goes out, touches the sense contents, sparsha, that's called a sparsha, then it changes, that ray of vision changes, comes back, and that altered ray of vision rearranges itself with your thinking brain to create what you see. In this sense, when you are having that moment with God, when you're looking into God's eyes, your eye visions are touching, your eye vision goes out, touches God, changes, and carries God back into you, inside of you. So in Darshan, you are touching God just with your eyes, and God is touching you. Caveat: never physically touch a Hindu image, for you would defile it. I mean, anybody would unless they're a priest. The reason why priests do the rituals around the images is they have maintained a state of purity of supposedly mind, body, and heart, but mostly they have avoided anything that will pollute them. So they can touch God because God is considered, because they are pure and God is pure, but you're not pure. Whether you're an Indian or a Westerner, you're not pure. So do not touch those Hindu images. Now, if you're wandering in Nepal and you happen to be in Kathmandu, you will walk into some of these smaller shrines. You will see people actively touching gods. This freaked me out, took me a little while to get used to, but it just shows you that a lot of these ideas are different wherever you go. Also, in a lot of Nepali temples, you won't take off your shoes. If you are going to a Hindu temple, it's predominantly attended to by Indians, be sure to take your shoes off. So take your shoes off and do not touch any statues. All right. Okay, so let's get really into what Srinivas is talking about. So Tulasi Srinivas wrote this recent book. I think it came out in 2018. I can't remember for sure. Let me look for just a second, because I like you all to know these things. 2018 by Duke University Press. This book came out, The Cow in the Elevator. Now, what's the meaning of the title and what is wonder? So she has this big innovation where she says, I'm going to look at how people have wonder, have that awestruck moment, how people think, wow, this is amazing in a temple context, then ask, how do they feel it? Why do they feel it? How do they react to that? And how does this also have to do with technological innovation? Because she finds numerous cases that we read about today that this experience of wonder is definitely mediated, it's definitely brought about through interactions with technology and technological innovations and ways to express being religious. So the name cow in the elevator comes from a ritual that she observed. It's called Vastu Shastra, which is a blessing of a domicile, an architectural blessing, a ritual that blesses a new house. But she attends this ritual in a brand new high-tech luxury apartment building. So part of a traditional house blessing has you build your new house and you bring a cow and it walks through the building, and everything it does blesses the home. Does it, urinate? Does it defecate? Does it blow its nose? Does it step on this thing? Does it knock your table over? But everything the cow does in that house is considered a blessing. Why? Because the cow is inherently pure and is inherently giving forth of itself and giving forth the blessings of God. She describes a really comical experience of trying to coax the cow into the building and then up into the elevator and into a really, really nice apartment. And she pretty much says, it's harder than you'd think to get a cow into an elevator and into a high-rise apartment. Here, the old and the new are found together. Old traditions are not cast off by any means, but they're updated and grafted into a new apartment. So part of this is a sense of wonder. People are like, wow, this is amazing. We got this cow in this elevator and we did a traditional blessing of this house, of this high-tech apartment using the traditional way of the cow. Now, you might wonder about the cow poop. Well, because the cows have what they call the 5 nectars: their urine, their butter, their milk, their dung, and one other that I can't remember. So those are all considered inherently pure products of the cow. Of course, not the meat of the cow. And the other interesting thing is cow urine and cow poop is inherently pure unless it touches something impure. So the minute the cow poop drops out of it and hits the ground, it's still inherently pure and is considered a blessing in and of itself. Kind of wild. Okay, the wonder, the wonderful, the wondrous. Let's wonder about wonder for a second. From the Oxford English Dictionary, the only dictionary you should ever be using in academic writing, wonder is the emotion excited by the perception of something novel, something new and unexpected or inexplicable. Astonishment mingled with perplexity or bewildered curiosity. Also, the state of mind in which this emotion exists. An instance of this, a fit of wonderment. So what are some of these elements of wonder that we see here? Well, Srinivas focuses on those experiences that she observes and sometimes feels herself when priests and devotees experience excitement. They spontaneously laugh, cry, stand gape-mouthed and wide-eyed. It's a catharsis. And what does catharsis mean? Catharsis means when the body reacts to an aesthetic experience. So when chills go up your spine when you hear a really beautiful song, or when you get really scared when you're even watching a horror movie, when there's a bodily component to wonder. When you experience wonder and amazement, your body feels it. It's more than just an emotion in your head or your heart. You go, wow. Okay. So she looks for the eruption of wonder in ritual and in ritual technologies. We can locate this wonder in her in her observations, we see wonder on the part of the priests. They are wondrous. They get amazed by stuff. The congregation, the people that go there, that go to the temple, like, oh, suddenly they see a goddess who's moving, an animatronic. And even to the casual passerby. So if you're just walking by and you see something really cool in a temple, even if you're not a Hindu, you might go, wow, that's really something. So wonder is not unique to Hinduism or even to religion in general. It happens to us anytime we're shocked in a pleasant way. For me, I experience the sense of wonder within Hinduism when I travel to a rare temple or I go to a famous temple that I've always wanted to go to, and I've always wanted to see this God, and I'm just go, wow, I feel myself amazed to be able to see that. One thing that I've noticed is that when you see the gods out of context, such as in a religious procession or a parade, there's always a sense of wonder. You'll see here up on the left, this is a temporary image of Ganesh for the holiday of Ganesh Chaturthi, the 14th day of Ganesh. This happens in late summer. And people make these incredible sort of paper mache and clay images of Ganesh, and then they parade them through the street, and everybody's like, wow, look, Ganesh is out. Look at this cool version of him. What's going to happen next? Well, they take him through the streets, and then they put him in a river and submerge him, and that's part of the ritual. When they're the clay ones, they just sort of dissolve. It's kind of cool. So you worship a deity, you build the deity, you worship the deity, you wander the deity through, and everybody who sees the deity around goes, wow, that's pretty cool. And then everybody watches with wonder as the deity dissolves right before them as they sink it in the water. Many Hindus express wonder when they see how beautiful a deity appears, or how glorious are the outfits and adornments. The outfits or adornments are what's called alankara, and we see this word come up a lot in Srinivas. So alankara is jewelry, clothing, any type of beauty enhancing thing is called an alankara. So including like the types of woven flowers and types of flowers and banners and whatnot that surround the deity. So, I mean, I remember one Hindu friend coming out of a temple that we had just gone to, and I remember her saying to me, did you see the linga? It was so beautiful. Now, remember, Shiva linga is not only a phallic symbol, but it is aniconic. It doesn't look like a human being. It's not anthropomorphic. But the way that they put like holy lines on the linga, I remember the day really well, and the way they tied sort of these really beautiful sadis around it, it was really beautiful. And I myself thought too, oh, wow, that is a really beautiful way to depict that linga. So what does this all have to do with technology? Well, Srinivas who's informed by the interviews with her priests and her devotees, because she's an anthropologist, shows how technology inspires wonder, and that inspired wonder translates into greater devotion, a renewed sense of the sacred, revealing the complexity of the divine. So when you experience wonder, you're like, oh, wow, it was so amazing to see that deity. Suddenly you feel closer to that deity. You feel a greater sense of that bhakti devotionalism. But it also causes you to think about that deity more and think about the philosophies that deity expresses. So that sense of wonder renews one's sense of connection to the deity and to the religion of Hinduism. This would be in contrast to usual descriptions in anthropology from insiders that will say that the modern world and modern ritual interventions is ruining Hinduism forever. Never trust somebody who says that the old ways are gone and that Hinduism is never what it once was. Never trust anybody that makes that argument in general, because there's always something more to it. For usually technology creates something new. When we interact with a new technology in a non-religious way, we are always surprised. Like the first time you got an iPad, you're like, whoa, look at this. Or I just got a new Mac laptop after having PCs for years and being sick of them. And I'm amazed at the things these things can do. I get a sense of wonder. Sometimes my jaw even drops at how easy it was to set up my printer. Anyway, so that surprise that we have turns into routine, as I can now neglect my cell phone as just being a cell phone. As I was a late adopter of the smartphone. And when I first got a smartphone, I was just amazed at how easy it was to text. And now that's just something obvious and routine. Now, when technological innovations are added to ritual and religion, the sacred itself becomes newfangled and exciting. Traditional folk might see this as just spectacle, as some of the priests are like, who cares? You get God on the internet, whatever. But the priests and devotees also see inspired wonder that enhances the experience and immediacy of the divine. These innovative depictions of the deities will get people excited. Anything that inspires devotion is probably a good thing, as one old teacher of mine used to always say. All right, so I've read nothing other like this. I've never read another study of technology. I've never read a close study of the temple priests like this. The access to these priests and their reasoning when they describe the technological innovation is absolutely unique, which makes this book really interesting. Few folks actually really talk to priests when they study Hinduism, mostly because the priests aren't accessible. The priest will see a white guy come and they'll be like, I am pure, you stay away from, you are impure. But Srinivas is actually, she's doing the research in the family in an area where her family has lived for generations, and she's known these priests for a long time. So they really give her quite a bit of access. Now, traditionalists that are insiders and scholars have argued, as I said before, that technological innovation is a degeneration of religion. This study shows otherwise, showing that it enlivens religions and provides a wider access, because we'll especially see with social media, somehow even people who could never see these images can now see them online. So engaging in a darshan, witnessing a religious procession, singing a holy song, or praying in the home are all acts of worship, devotion, and prayer, all at the same time. All these actions inspire connection to the deity, who may grant a wish, inspire more bhakti-style devotion, or even lead to contemplations of the non-dual mysteries. Maybe seeing Ganesha makes you think about how all of these things are just one. I would argue that the first part, granting a wish, getting into a more auspicious state, is the most common reaction to darshan. And I think we should look at that a fair bit more than we actually do. So why is technology such a big deal, especially in this context? Well, Srinivas's fieldwork site is in a place called Bangalore, or now Bengaluru. This is where her family lives and where her father resides, in fact. Himself, he is a legendary sociologist of Hinduism. His name is M.N. Srinivas. I don't have a slide for this. So M.N. Srinivas posited a thing called Sanskritization, which I've said that word before. This is when a lower caste adopts Brahminical customs and behaviors associated with Sanskrit literary sources in order to raise their social status. So people will be like, you're from a low caste. Like, no, I'm a vegetarian. What? No, I got a Sanskrit name. What? So this is kind of like passing in the US when we're talking about race, when someone is, say, very light-skinned and starts, trying to pass for being white. It's kind of like passing. So you pick up and code switching as well. It's a very knowledgeable code switch so that you are sort of using a more dominant, well, a sociologically dominant form of behavior in order to try to raise your own social status. So Bangalore, or Bengaluru, is a unique city in contemporary India. It is the new high-tech India, the Indian Silicon Valley. Bangalore is the site of tremendous education, lots of engineering firms, software companies, and high-tech services. When I first went in the 90s, it was just called the Garden City, and it did have beautiful gardens, so it was starting to get polluted. But now it is a city of high-rises and luxury apartments. There's also incredible wealth here. You are not in the villages. The locals are predictably tech savvy because they're all engineers and always have the newest, most up-to-date gadgets, both hardware and software, much of which is designed in Bangalore itself. The new and the newfangled for most Bangalore folks is inherently good, and the old is considered old-fashioned. You want the new thing. You don't want the old thing. They embrace new technology and an attitude of innovative hacks to make sense of everything. It's a town of engineers that are trying to make their lives and their countries easier or more technologically engaged. And that's just the culture of the place. Now, as you're reading, you'll notice that she engages in various languages. So they speak Kannada, which is the language of the area of that state. They also speak Tamil, like in Tamil Nadu. Then there's Sanskrit liturgy. And then a lot of people speak English too. This is common in a South Indian city where people will shift between these languages and their different registers. Her fieldwork connects experiences over about 20 years of research, and India changed quite a bit during that time. Technology expanded incredibly over this time frame, and Indians have been fast to pick up phones and smartphones, entering the mass media age and digital age faster than they could develop other infrastructure. There was mass use of cell phones in every home in the 2000s, while a minority of homes still didn't have running water. Yes, this is to say, cell phones got so big so fast that you'd go out to villages where there is no well and everybody would have a cell phone. I would go out to like mountain towns where there would be very little infrastructure, but they would have satellite dishes and they would be able to watch, the current news in their own language and watch Hindi films. So technology has sort of advanced incredibly rapidly in India. In fact, when I first went to India, phones in general weren't even in people's homes. They just didn't have home phones. You would have like one phone for every 50 people, and you'd have to go to like a phone booth or what they called a pay stall. And now nearly everyone has a cell phone. Okay, the helicopter and Garuda. I'm going to talk about two things here and then move on to our next case. The first is the installation of a goddess. Well, actually, the first is a mechanical goddess, and the second is the installation of a goddess. Now, in 1999, one of the temple priests became enamored with mechanical processes, and he wanted to build a moving and animatronic, by which I mean like, at Showbiz Pizza, Chuck E. Cheese, or Disney World, an animatronic or animated mobile goddess. During the late summer festival of the 9 nights, which is dedicated to the goddess Durga or Mahishasuramardini. Remember, Mahishasuramardini is the goddess who crushes the buffalo demon. All right, so what's the story? Well, you may remember that Mahishasuramardini is the embodiment of all the power or Shaktis of all the gods and her own Shakti. And she slays this vicious buffalo demon who attempts to capture her consciousness. Eventually, she beheads him, and then she beheads the buffalo, and then as the demon tries to sneak out, she stabs that guy with a spear. So he eventually does succeed, and he creates this mechanical goddess. She's adorned with flashing lights, and her mechanical arm slays and stabs the demon over and over again. The crowds witnessed this in '99. And the crowd witnessed the lit up goddess moving and conquering the buffalo demon, and they're overjoyed. I mean, but think about it. What would it be like to have a usually static image you can suddenly see moving and with flashing lights? There's something to it. And while the tech may seem simple, it is actually quite effective. I've seen some of these. Suddenly, the old goddess who's only seen in a stone image is alive. She's refreshed. She also pulls in new and younger worshipers who are attracted to this new version of her, this technological version of her. The technological advance pulls us toward our dreams of seeing that goddess alive. Also, she's seen in a different way. I think this idea of seeing deities in a new context is a huge predictor of wonder. You're like, I'm used to seeing her as a stone image. Now I'm seeing her on TV. Whoa. I'm used to seeing her as a stone image. Now I'm seeing her paraded through the street. Whoa. I'm used to seeing her not moving. Now she's moving. Also around 99, and this is still here, there's a place called the Tulasi Mandir in Benares, in which they have like sort of these little figures that are all kind of animated in their own way, animatronic figures that act out all of the Ramcharitmanas, the Ramayana written by Tulsidas. I described it when I first went in my journal as it's a small world ride from Disney World, but for Hinduism. Yeah, so here's sorry, I didn't skip ahead. So here's one of these mechanized goddesses being paraded through the street. There she is with her lion. That's probably a Durga. Okay, so I wanted to just briefly tell you about an intriguing part of Hindu culture in the 20th century. In the 1960s, there was a minor deity named Santoshima or Santoshimata, the mother of satisfaction. She became very popular throughout India because a devotee of hers made a big budget, widely distributed Hindi film. Seeing the film became a religious experience, and a lot of people went to see it, but mostly women would go, which is uncommon for women to go to movie theaters alone. You may remember what happened in Tamil Nadu. So they would go and they would see this goddess and the story of her on the screen. The movie's fun. You can see it. It's subtitled now on YouTube. It's called Jai Santoshima, victory to the mother who is fully satisfied, or the mother of satisfaction. And what's happened was that you didn't really see she became really popular, but you didn't see like new temples popping up for her. In fact, Santoshima became a popular deity worshipped by women in home ritual worship, pujas, along with fasting practices like not eating anything sour on Fridays or not eating at all on like Thursday afternoons or something like that. And these were done by women for the auspiciousness of her family. So by taking this somewhat smaller goddess and putting her into a big movie that everybody saw, then suddenly people started doing home worship of her in their daily lives. Yet again, wonderment. And when people would describe going to see these images, they would describe how they experienced wonder at seeing the goddess alive and up and moving and hearing her story. Okay, so after we've talked about the animated goddess, what about this goddess Banashankari, this forest goddess? Well, the main priest for the Ganesh temple wishes to install a regional goddess named Banashankari, the forest goddess, at the Ganesha temple. His thinking is that there's a version of a goddess in the south side of town that brings forth tons of female devotees. And he thinks that if he establishes a goddess up here in the north side of town, you'll have tons and tons of female devotees that'll come and have more women come in to visit. Now, remember, on a lot of these temples, it's not just one god. They'll have lots of other little gods all over the place. So you can have a Ganesh temple and then put this Banashankari in somewhere else near the temple. And it doesn't take away from the Ganesh. Nothing takes away from Ganesh. But it's just like more gods at the party. And more gods at the party is a good thing. So the temple priests rent a helicopter and they send up a young priest up with offerings of flower petals and consecrated waters to be dropped out of the helicopter in order to rain down upon the goddess who has just had her eyes painted on and has come to life. They actually tease him and keep calling him Top Gun, which I find amusing. After they paint the eyes in the goddess, the priest in the helicopter drops all the offerings. Now remember, the raining of flowers and auspicious items from the sky is common in Hindu literature as a sign of divine presence. As the helicopter approaches the temple, a large bird flies out in front of it. Now, these birds are called kites, and they are huge. They're really big birds, and what they do is they float over cities and they just kind of coast on the air currents. So at this point, people look up and they go, oh my goodness, look at that giant bird in front of the helicopter. And they say, this must be Garuda. Who's Garuda? Garuda is the large bird that you see on the left that Vishnu rides, and sometimes Krishna is seen riding. He is an interesting creature. He's a powerful ally of Vishnu. And everybody who sees that bird flying thinks they make the connection between the god and the helicopter. Garuda is known to dominate and kill enemies, demons, and especially snakes. The head priest, upon looking at all this, says, oh, all of this is made to happen because of Ganesh. It's Ganesh's, who's the head of the temple, happiness about everything that's happening. So old stories and symbols are now made new by reading onto them technological wonder. The world is a mixed up place, as one of the priests says, and all the old and the new come together into a masala, like a masala movie. Masala just means mixed. It comes from the Sanskrit word mishra. So if you get chicken tikka masala, that's chicken with a tikka tomato sauce and a blend of spices. So and when they say a masala movie, that's what a lot of Bollywood is. It means something for everyone. A masala movie has action, it has romance, it has friendship, it has comedy, it's got a wedding. So many Indian movies are so wide spanning like that, and they call them masala movies. They're all mixed up. So what I find interesting here is you have a Ganesh temple that's installing a local goddess who's a Shiva goddess that I can tell from her name. And then as they're installing that, they see a witness of Vishnu's vehicle. All of it's messed up. Well, it's not messed up. It's just all mixed up. So in mass media and mass technology, every sign floats away from its signature. And we all live in this sort of pastiche, this bricolage, this crazy quilt. The implications of this will be seen in our lifetime. Now, I used 3 terms there. Pastiche means putting together a whole bunch of seemingly unrelated things to create a whole image. Bricolage is when you take broken tiles and you put them all together in plaster, and you took all those broken colored tiles and you put them together to form an image. So these broken others become part of a whole. Or a crazy quilt, because what do you do in a quilt but you take scraps of all sorts of different clothing and whatnot, and you embroider them together and stitch them together to create a quilt. The main priest interprets all of this kind of craziness, this mixed upness, using the Chandogya Upanishad, one of the earlier Upanishads. So he actually says that new things are the avatars of old things. So everything that's new is an avatar of the old, which I think is actually pretty good. That's a pretty good argument. One priest worries that now everyone will want a helicopter for consecrating images. And that's true. This is a danger of innovation. The new and the wonderful becomes expected, daily, quotidian. Drums of contention. For some reason, this is one of the most interesting parts of this study for me. Temples traditionally hire musicians to perform in festivals and religious processions, but those are like the special times that you have a musician. But these temple priests will also accompany morning rituals, or will accompany rituals throughout the day, rituals to wake up the gods, evening worship to the gods, rituals to put the god to bed. Notice that the gods live through the same daily cycles as humans. Now, a conflict brewed here when a head priest fired the hereditary musicians, saying that they did not do a good job and that they were often late. Srinivas says this was not true. She's like, I tried to stay out of it, but I had to speak up for these musicians. She wasn't able to do anything. The musician's profession is hereditary, and for generations, they've been temple musicians at this temple. Now, the main priest is inspired, and he contacts a local engineer who makes him a drum machine. This machine would play 2 additional drums in 6 different syncopated patterns of sound. So notice that they couldn't just record the music and play it again. That wouldn't work. Traditional music is different every time it's performed, not like when you put on a song or you stream a song, it's always the same. It is nuanced by the musicians. This drum machine removes the nuance from the performance. Traditional musicians say that mechanical performances and pre-recorded music have no rasa, no flavor, no emotion, no feeling. I think there's something to that. Now, older folks at the temple think that there's a drum going off all all the time at specific times to accompany rituals, thinks it makes a horrible racket. But young people kind of like it. The old folks say that the youth and their demand for new and innovation is a sign of moral degeneration. The young folks like it because as Bangalore kids, they like anything new and technological. Eventually, they argue that the loud racket of these drums is really good because you don't listen to the music of the musicians anymore. The sound just tunes out everything so you can only focus on God. It's like a really loud white noise that drowns out the world. And that kind of makes sense and is actually sort of theologically sophisticated. Mechanical machines and these drum machines are everywhere now in Bangalore. Furthermore, you actually will find in some temples pre-recorded professional worship music. They'll be played through speakers. I don't like it. I'm kind of a traditionalist myself. Okay, so I want to kind of close up what we're talking about today with a few more instances of talking about technology and the visual by talking about film, the digital, and the virtual. So what about cameras and what about films from the get-go? Traditionally, and this was absolutely true when I first went to India, nobody would pull out a camera and take a picture. Nobody would take a picture of an image. Scholars like me would only do so in a sneaky way, put my camera up really high, take a picture when nobody was looking, and I would get scolded an awful lot. Priests actually used to argue that by capturing an image of the god on film, you were pulling away the power of the god and taking it elsewhere. This argument, however, is kind of funny because it can only be as old as photography. So they can't go back to the Sanskrit sources on this because there were no cameras at the time. And as far as I'm aware, there is no regulation against making a painting or a drawing or any type of a reproduction by hand of an image in a temple. Now, this would be mediated because people would want souvenirs, obviously. I always did. You could always buy high quality pictures of the gods at the temple that would be taken by professional photographers and then sold by the temple. Well, but didn't they take a picture of the god and steal the power of the god? What? I mean, how is that effective? I always was confused by that. I actually think it's kind of nice to not have people take pictures in temples, and I'll talk about this more in a second, because there's so many people trying to take pictures, it's hard to see the god. And people get so wrapped up in like trying to get that perfect selfie with the god that, you know, it seems like they're losing the experience of being there. But again, I am a fuddy-duddy. Younger people actually made the argument that the images of the god were the intellectual property of the temples. So it makes sense that they would say, don't you take that picture, you can buy this picture. Older folks would use more metaphysical arguments like, who are you to take away the body of God? Again, but then they still sell images. So Srinivas describes that when she first went to these temples in the 1990s, she was constantly scolded and told to never take a picture of the deity. When she returned in the early 2000s, she had a really nice camera, and the priests were still like, no, 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 don't you take a picture. They would only let her take pictures around the temple and of temple worshipers, and they would scold her anytime she appeared to take a picture of the main image. So camera stuff. But something changes. Something really, really changes. Digital photography happens. Srinivas shows up with a digital camera and notes that most of the devotees have cell phones with cameras in them now. Remember, I was saying that all Indians have cell phones, you know? They may not have running water, but they will have cell phones. It's amazing. And they're much more sophisticated in their use of cell phones than Westerners are. Okay, so she shows up with this digital camera, and the main priest says, "Ha-ha," and puts her right in front of the main god. She can take pictures of everything. And the priest positions her in such a way that she has to take a picture that contains the image of the god, because the place where the priest put her has the god all over the place. Look at these pictures here. You see these people with this woman with a picture with a god, this guy with trying to get the perfect selfie stick. Even over here, we see Shiva, Ganesh, Parvati, and Nandi, and even Ganesh has a selfie stick trying to take a picture of himself with his dad, who is God. Okay, so she's like, well, I guess I can take a picture of everything. And the main priest comes up to her all the time, wants to look through all the photos she's taken, and he loves them. And he actually finds, and Srinivas finds, that folks are constantly taking pictures and they share them with friends, even sending them, posting them online, sending them SMS, texting them to people. And this was my experience too. When I first went to India in 99, and I remember my trip back in 2009, suddenly in every temple, people were taking pictures. Some would have digital cameras, but mostly they'd just be using their phones. There was no regulation against taking pictures anymore. One friend of mine, when we went on a pilgrimage trip, my friend Sam actually turned to me. He's a Christian, hence his name Sam, but he took me to a really important site in Maharashtra. It was actually a wonderful day. But I remember him saying, "Why are you taking all these pictures? They're all online. Just go get the picture online." So folks now actually collect these digital images. They'll store an incredible amount of those images on their phones and their computers. Priests even want to look back and see old photos that were not supposed to be taken. So people are going in and scanning old photos that they might have where they did take a picture of the gods. And suddenly the priests love them. They want to look them. They want to see how the temple was arranged, how the alankaras were made. So the images can also be spread on social media. And folks often say, I can send this image to my son in the US and he can see how beautiful God is and get some good luck out of it. In my experience, folks take tons of these pictures of deities. And they take these pictures and selfies to show that they were there with the gods, to show that they've been there, and even to inspire FOMO, fear of missing out, in others. Also, they treat these images as if they are themselves God. The digital images become like murtis in and of themselves. So for instance, this is an image that I stole offline, but it's an image I quite love. This is Jagannath, who we're going to talk about in the next class. And he is my favorite god in Hinduism. When I was taking my PhD exams, whenever that was ago, I put this image on my laptop screen so God could be looking at me as I took my PhD exams, I took my comps. And that meant a lot to me. Here's the thing. Westerners are not allowed in his main temple in Puri. Absolutely not. I kind of tried once, but I was passing really well. I was shaven headed. I had a good mustache. I had my lungi on and I almost got in, but they were finally like, nope, you're out of here, buddy. But yeah, so Westerners can't go in, but you can get these images easily to see them. And in this sense, you get a wider access to the deities. What about social media? Temples now have social media pages themselves in which folks can see images from the temple or post images from the temple and disseminate a huge number of images and interact with those images on their computer screen. They also tell stories about miracles and vows and prayers that were answered by the deity and make up memes about these deities. Images abound on social media and on YouTube. Folks make slideshows and videos of temple worship. They add modern devotional songs. In this way, the temple is still most importantly a physical place, but you can commune with the temple and even do ritual services when away from the temple. And here's our last point. Digital religion and digital ritual. Srinivas describes her mother, who's in Boston at the time, needing some minor surgery, but they wanted to have a ritual done in advance for good luck, to ward off danger, to worship God, all the like. These are what's called apotropaic rites. Apotropaic means a ritual that wards off bad stuff. Hindus always do this. Gonna have an important exam? Go see God do a ritual. Gotta have some surgery? Go see God do a ritual. Need a promotion? Go see God do a ritual. Now, in this way, these rituals provide structure and provide structure to changes and uncertainties in daily life. So she contacts the temple by phone in India from Boston, and the priest directed her to sponsor a number of pujas. The priest quickly consulted the astrologers that they knew and figured out the right people that they needed to hire, the right time to do it, and the right people to do it. Now, this is kind of interesting. While they were trying to figure out a family member or a close acquaintance or a local friend to be there and witness the ritual, sponsor the ritual, and stand in for them as the ritual sponsors, the priest suggests that they use Skype and FaceTime and Facebook to take part in the rituals themselves from afar. They ended up engaging in the ritual from a continent away. Many priests performed all these offerings, but they, on the little like laptop screen and phones and whatnot, were also considered there. The network would occasionally drop and then catch up again, and the priests would communicate them all the while, either on the phone or on different internet platforms. That, you know, the internet's going to fuzz out, especially it's in India, on the other side of the world. During one of the drop network periods, Srinivas actually puts her phone in front of an image of Ganesh that they had on the table by their house. And when the priest signed back on, he laughs really hard and said, "Okay, my boss is on the phone," which I think is hysterical, but that's me. In this way, technology allows people to be united from far off. It facilitates rituals, and it allows the sense of wonder at the novel and the new opportunities to worship a god using priests to mediate it from the other side of the world, which is unthinkable even 20 years ago. With this novelty, or will this novelty of performing a ritual, even while far separated physically, ever wear off? I don't think this one will. This is going to stay a thing that people are always kind of amazed by. So what's our takeaway? What's the point? So much of religion and religious history is about painful conflicts, dissatisfaction, and violence. But here we see people really coming together, having pleasant and non-extreme experiences. They experience the sacred and the divine in their everyday life. When we look at wonder, when we look at people experiencing wonder, we're doing something different than trying to understand the social meanings for why people do stuff, to get everything down to, caste or to resource differences or to family history. When we're looking at people experiencing wonder, we're seeing people being pious. I have a professor who always argues, don't discount piety as a reason for a person's actions. And this was a critique against sort of a Marxist reading. He was like, why did this Tibetan priest do this thing that seems unexpected? Because he loved the Buddha that he was worshiping there so much. So don't discount piety. And I like this looking at wonder in Hinduism, because we're not seeing Hindus behaving badly. We're seeing kind of the best of what Hinduism can be, and that's experiencing the glorious wonder at the gods in the world. Seeing God is a powerful experience. Just seeing God for the Hindu creates an everyday sense of wonder, but using technology, they're able to see God more often and in new ways. Focusing on wonder places the focus on pleasure. Religion is fun. Temple time is really fun. Temple time is a glorious time to connect with God and do a whole bunch of crazy stuff. My friend Arun always says, man, Hindu temples are crazy. Go in, they're throwing flowers around, breaking coconuts. It's just a mess, but it's a good time. He's raised in the United States as a Tamil Brahmin, but religion is fun. Focusing on wonder focuses on pleasure. Often after I take darshan in a Hindu temple, I just sit there. I just sit in the corner, enjoying just being with God. I had another friend who, after we would take darshan, she would always say to me, should we just sit and be with God? I'd say, yeah, I just want to sit and be with God. Technological innovations like this make the old fresh. It pulls in people. It invigorates people. As one of my teachers would say, regardless of whatever philosophical position or religious phenomenon we were talking about in Hinduism, he'd say, does it inspire devotion? Then it is good. There's something to that. So what am I overall arguing for? Well, I think there's a chance that we can re-enchant the world. Max Weber famously said, the father of sociology, said that the world was disenchanted in modernity. When we became modern, when we went through the Enlightenment, which is not like Enlightenment in Asia, but when we started valuing the material understanding the world, when we started seeing everything as being scientific and material, the operation of material forces, we lost something. Religion was only about things you believed, not about magical miracles that happen in the world. As modern folks, we try to only look at the world as it is and only look at it as physical. But how might the world become re-enchanted? How might we feel the presence of God more? All around me, folks are turning to alternative religions and the esoteric, seeking mystical experiences. And these are easily facilitated. There's a lot of ways to get there. The world is less cut from spirit than one would think. Technology, and I often refer to the esoteric or occult technologies or hidden technologies. Technology allows for new experiences of the divine, the new being an avatar of the old. But it is not that the new in the novel replaces the old. The old lives on. The old lives on fresh in the new. So, how can technology create wonder? Do you look at that Ganesh there on the right that's clearly, computer generated and as magnificent and go, ugh, it's just not the same? Or do you look at Ganesha on the right and see, that's a pretty awesome Ganesh. I can remember him on the lotus holding his right hand up and the ladus, and there's the goat, and there's the noose. There's his one tusk. Maybe they're the same. Maybe they're different. Maybe they're the ever happening play or lila of the gods. Hard to say. But if we can find a way to have a more wonderful world, I think we should. All right, I'll catch you next time.